news service. Yet another headline concerning drugs, 19 years later in September 2016. Opioid overdoses on the rise in South Boston. And then, it was like a war zone, busing in Boston. Nearly a century after Irish immigrants of South Boston faced bigotry, Southie became the center of the now notorious busing scandal, which left the people of South Boston covered with an image of racism. There is no description of Southie that could omit the infamous mark upon its soil, the busing crisis of the 1970s. This bad rap began with the court-ordered desegregation of its schools in 1974, when a federal judge, J. Arthur Garrity, Jr., ordered white students from South Boston High School to be bused to the nearby town of Roxbury, which, in turn, would send its black students to South Boston schools. Southie erupted in fury, organized marches, and did whatever it could to halt the court order. Opposition to court-ordered school busing turned violent on the opening day of classes. School buses carrying black students were pelted with eggs, bricks, and bottles, and police in combat gear fought to control angry white protesters besieging the schools. And finally, church allowed abuse by priest for years. Aware of Gagan record, Archdiocese still shuttled him from parish to parish. Hundreds of church sex abuse victims continue to come forward. From a November 6, 2015 Boston Globe story about the database of accused clergy in Boston Archdiocese. Since 2011, at least 271 clergy, a mix of permanent and visiting priests, pastors, chaplains, deacons, religious order clerics, and nuns, have been publicly accused of child sex abuse in the Boston Archdiocese. Accusations have led to criminal charges, lawsuits, and reviews by church officials. Priests have been convicted, sentenced to jail, and stripped of their religious duties. In some cases, they've been cleared by the courts and the church. Despite the headlines that often expose this insular community, keeping things out of Southie and its people in had been the nature of this community for generations. Thanks to its location, sitting directly to the south and east of downtown Boston, to which it is connected by a series of bridges, this densely populated neighborhood, with its present and growing population of 35,200, had a certain narrowness that formed, protected, and harmed its community in multiple ways. But that isolation was inevitably destined to be destroyed. No location that hugged Boston Harbor, with thousands of feet of undeveloped property, could close the gates to these bridges and remain locked in the past. Gentrification began in the 90s, and by 2002 was completely revived with young professionals, posh restaurants, and rents high enough to push out most homegrown old Southie residents. The old Southie, during the 50s and 60s, had held the distinction of having more bars and churches per capita than any other city in the country. Here, as many residents proudly declared, you could drink and cavort all you wanted, and walk a few feet from the bar to a nearby church and be absolved of all your sins. The men of Southie had their own reputation as loyal patriots with little fear of warfare, as evidenced by the fact that recruiters for the Marines were known to meet their quota in this one neighborhood. No decent Southie man would turn away from a good fight, either on the street or in the trenches. Southie was equally remarkable for the fact that the first government-sponsored housing projects in the country were built there in 1940, as a cluster of 22 three-story brick buildings housing 873 low-income units. These projects offered affordable housing to those who qualified, creating close-knit neighborhoods where parents felt their children were safe, and children found their days filled with playmates and friends. Neighbors became family, as mothers watched out for each other's children. These housing developments remained predominantly white until July 1988, when two black families moved into the Mary Ellen McCormick development.